Hi everybody, it's your friend in 3D printed resin, Eric Goggins. I run Toys, and today we're going to be covering how to lay out and print the SS Ile-de-France 1927 in Lychee Slicer. Here's the model we'll be slicing today. There's also the two-funnel 1948 refit version available in both STL and hard copy form. The STL is available from Liner's World. They're on cgtrader.com or cults3d.com. Just search Liner's World. Or if you'd like a hard copy, I have a sale going at yestertoys.com right now. That's YESTR toys.com. So let's get into slicing this model. I slice it with Lychee Slicer Pro 5.4.3, it's the newest version. You're going to want the Pro version. It has a bunch of extra features that are handy, and I'll demo them today, and you'll see the value proposition there. So the first thing you're going to want to do is bring in your model. This 900 scale Ile-de-France is a bit too large for my mono 4K, so I need to swap to my M5S. And we'll rotate it so it's on the plate. And then we'll rotate it up to about 40 degrees. It's close to the optimal pixel pitch, but it's long enough so that it can't be at the perfect pixel pitch. So 38's a pretty good pixel pitch. I'm going to lift it off the plate by about 5 millimeters. This allows the supports to form before they meet the hull. So now that it's in the optimal position, I'm going to go to the supports section. And let's start by putting holes and hollowing. So I do all of my models with a 1.8 millimeter sidewall and 14% infill. If you try and print something like this solid, it's going to have issues. It's a little bit too big. So next we're going to do holes. 1.1 millimeters is a little bit too small. I'm going to raise it to 1.5, call 1.6. And it's got to be long enough to go through the hole. So let's drop this slice layer down to where it just starts to initially form the hollow. It's usually within just a couple of millimeters of the tip of these holes, and you can see it forming there. And what I'll do is I'll come around the back side of it and drop a drain. Oh, it's not quite making it into the void, so I need to raise that a little bit more. So I'll make that 5 point some odd, 5.4. Let's see how that did. Yep, you can see how the hole is now making it into the void just as it starts to form. That's just perfect. If you don't put a vent on a hollow model like this and it gets to the void, it's going to create a big suction cup and your model will most likely fail. We'll put in some more drains. On a model of this size, 10, 12 inches, I like to put in 10 drains at the front and 10 drains at the back, and allows the solvent to flood in and clean out the inside of the model so you don't end up with a failed model with a bunch of residue in it later on. Here at the back, I'm going to do maybe 5 on either side of the keel, close to the back of the hull. And then I'm going to come back here right at the very end and see where the void stops. And I'm going to put in 2 more drains at the very, very tail end. See right there. We want that to get just as clean as everywhere else in the hull. So I'll drop a drain in there and also on this side. And that's it for drains on the bottom. So we also have to be concerned about suction cupping from the top of the model. So you'll end up with an area where the model's forming and it doesn't have any air, so it'll suction cup on the top as well, and that can cause your model to fail. I'm not seeing a lot of that on this model. Let's go through it. There's a couple. As these couple areas form on the bridge, there's an area of void that has no way to get ventilated. So we're going to add 2 vents here and here. The toy store is right next to a rail yard, so you'll hear some train activity in the background. It's a feature, not a bug, I guess. Let's add 2 more here. And these also look like, these little pockets here also look like they could be a problem. They're not very big, so normally I would ignore them, but in this case I'm going to add a couple of small sub-millimeter drains there just to be sure. We're going to continue up the model looking for those pockets of potential suction cupping. Some little baby ones towards the back. Well, actually some fairly large baby ones. Let's see here. Fat baby. I'll throw some of these small vents back here. And I did notice that the smokestacks are hollow in the middle of them, and what I'm going to do in this case, and I'm going to go just for this model and make it a bit thicker than my standard. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that the smokestacks are solid. You don't have to worry about it getting rinsed out properly. And most of the time I like to do a 1.8 millimeter sidewalls, but sometimes models just don't agree with that and it makes it harder. So we're going to go with a 2 millimeter sidewall. And to do that, you just pop into the thickness and hollowing and raise that up to 2 millimeters. Right, so those are now solid, but we need to go back and check the other vent holes that we made to make sure they're making contact into the body of the model. And that one is just barely. We'll call that probably fine. It's making contact for 3 layers, 2 layers. Well, maybe I'll move that one over a little bit. So let's see which one that is. Yep, and it's going to delete it and place it again. And this one was a 1.6, 1.5 millimeter, something like that. Yeah, good enough. So let's see how that does making contact with the interior. Yes, it makes good contact with the interior. And now, oh, that one goes to the outside of the model. So let's see how that is going to look. And you can see where the drains end, or the holes end, because it has a gray bar on how far it goes. Come out here to the outside of your model and make sure that you're not going to be scarring up your model with the tail end of a hole. And guess what, kids? We are doing that. So what I'm going to do is shorten these little holes so that way they do not make contact with the side of the hull. You'll see it pierce out the bottom of the promenade and end. It doesn't quite come out yet, so let's raise it up. 4.5, no, too much. 4.3, 4.1. So there we can see it's just barely popping out of the bottom of the promenade. And that's going to be good enough. Now we just need to do the one on the other side. 4.1, and you can actually type it in. And there you see it just barely popping out, so the model is still going to be intact. And that's all the suction cupping and all the drains that you need. Now let's move on to the hard part, the actual supporting of this model. There is a function called auto support in Lychee. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll run auto support and see what it calculates. I'll do that in this case. So I'm going to give it medium supports. I'm going to turn down the tip to about 50, 48, sure. 0.48 millimeters is good. It's not a super heavy model, and these are medium supports, and I'm going to use a whole ton of them, so there's going to be redundant supports. What I'll start with is full auto, and you can see sometimes even the pro version of Lychee kind of goes a little nuts with a complex model like a ship. Let's see what it does. Full auto, generate automatic supports. And so a lot of times with a simpler model, Lychee is going to do a really good job of supporting it, and you can just click the button and be pretty assured that you're going to be able to print this and it's going to succeed in resin. For the most part, that is not the case with ships, and I don't know why. They're pretty complex shapes. It's done a semi-decent job of supporting the keel, but see, if you come up here and look at some of the promenade supports, it throws these little mini supports in here almost at random, and they're so hard to remove just on their own. Makes it not worth trying to deal with, so let's just Control Z that. So here's where the Pro version of Lychee Slicer has its use. The keel is super easy to support with projection supports. It's a new thing in the last year or so. Projection supports are great for big flat surfaces. So you're going to draw a swath across the bottom of this hull, and you're going to fill in the stylized Liners World lettering. And we want to not hit these stabilizer rails on the side here, these little fins. If you put supports on those, they're going to break 100%. They're going to break. Don't do that. Then we're going to say Preview Supports. It's going to show you exactly where it's placing supports, how many, and we've got a pretty decent density here, and you can see at the front it's got a big line around the border of the selected field, which is perfect. So then we can add these 245 supports. And oh my god, it looks like so many supports, doesn't it? But it's not. We can go in and back to manual and hit parent. Lo and behold, it turns into about, half that many supports that are actually making it down to the base. And you don't want to forget adding bracings between them so that if one of them happens to fail a little bit, it'll get picked back up by the bracing next to it and the support next to it. So that's the bottom. Let's do the stem at the very front here. That's pretty simple. So they're all sharp surfaces, but Lychee will show you where there is a sub 50-degree angle in this yellow and orange crosshatch. Okay, so there is the stem and the leading edge of the keel. And I'm not going to put any supports up on the side of the ship. Maybe I'll do a couple. The issue with that is you have to go in and sand the little stubble that it makes when you remove them with clippers, or if they get torn off, they leave a little pock, and that has to be remediated. That is the bottom of the hull. Let's go look at the back of the hull. So here we have some islands. What are islands? Islands are where the machine gets up to a layer, and lo and behold, this part of the layer is not connected to the model anywhere else. So it needs special attention. You're going to have to put a couple of supports there, and then when you hit bracings, that will allow it to make such a long support run from the plate all the way to this little rudder. If you try and run a single support without any bracings, prepare to look at, well, a misprint, basically. It's like that one movie where people were growing old on a beach and the lady's arms kept getting broken. Yeah, it was a terrible scene, but that's basically what it looks like. Just a million breaks, and then it just fails, and you've got a blob of crap on the bottom of your screen. Brace yourselves. Okay, so that's pretty good. And we got the other prop over here that I missed. So let's do that. More bracings. That's a lot of bracings. Okay. We can move on now to the top of the ship. basically you have ventilators, the masts, and the davits for boats, and the leading edge of the boats are like 90% of what you support on the top of ships. So we'll add a little bracing there for rigidity. Here at the aft end, we have a bridge that I'm going to put some mini supports on. It already has its own mini supports, but this is a big flat surface and you're going to want extra supports. Those stairs there are acting as a support. These are medium supports. And what you're going to want to do is come in here and you can select all of them and hit mini support. And you can lower the diameter, raise the diameter. There's options. I tend to not go any smaller than a 0.35 millimeter support on a 35 micron machine. M5S is a little bit higher resolution than that, but you just want to have some margin of error. The davits and other structures, I'm going to continue to use mini supports. Sometimes Lychee will figure out that you want a mini support just based on where you are on the model and what's the nearest place it connects to. The issue with that is that it's putting this way far forward by default, and that's good for the most part, but for davits, these have ropes on them anyway, so oftentimes what I will do is make this look like a rope. And you just grab the end of it and bring it down to where it makes contact with the hull somewhere roughly parallel with the davit base. And then you just do that for every single boat on the ocean liner. Yay. Anywhere you have a leading edge, you're going to want to put a support. This one needs to be a little bit further out for the physics of it. There we go. More davits. Okay, here's an exception. These davits form pretty well on their own. They don't need any extra support. So I'm going to take a risk and leave them unsupported, and we'll just see how they turn out. The leading edge of these boats, however, are islands. And you'll see that they make a connection to the davit structure. So we don't have to put a support there, but you do want 2 or 3 mini supports in the middle of each lifeboat. So the fun thing about these models is oftentimes they have bilateral symmetry. That's the fancy word for you can cut them in half, duplicate the other half, mirror it, and you have the same model again. And I am begging Lychee, if you're listening, please, please, please make it so that if I add a support on one side of a model, I can go in, tell it which axis is the bilateral axis, and it'll produce the same exact support on the other side of the model. It would save me so much time. So now I got to go around the other side of the model and do the same thing again. All right, this is the last one forward. Come on. It's slightly smaller, but I'll still put 3 supports on it. And then we got to wiggle the model around in the model space until we can see that leading edge. We don't want that to be misprinted. There we go. When you do a a model-to-model connection like this, sometimes it'll pick something very flimsy to connect the base of this big support to, and you can move that to anywhere, and you should move it to a flat surface that's easy to trim. And I'm going to turn this into a mini support too. We've got these cranes up here that are capped. These make little islands. And when I've done all this, I'm going to come back and select all of these and make them mini. Let's keep moving back. It's always important to come up and look at your bridge deck. In this case, there are windows on either side that are going to act as supports for that sharp edge right here. And normally I would support this, but it looks like it's pretty well supported just from the model itself, and I'll leave it alone. So there's the front deck gear supported. We also have supports on the masts. I'm going to do a couple of supports for the bars. But you want these, they're not that tall, but you still want them to be supported. So you want to come in here and just select these. And I say that because I put a few supports on here I don't want bracings on. It just makes them harder to remove later. So you can select just the supports you want bracings and then hit bracings, and it'll say, okay, just those, you've got bracings now. And that is a lot of supports for a very, very small structure, but that is the price of doing business and trying to make masts and spars built into a model rather than printed separately. Yay. So let's keep moving back on the hull. We're almost done, and 40 minutes in. Check for ventilators or other structures that have islands near the top. And there it is, your fully supported ocean liner in 900 scale. This one's going to a customer, and she apparently appreciates the interwar liners. Now that you've added all your supports, you should save. You actually should probably save on and along as you're doing this. Lychee does a light save, which is good. It'll help if your computer crashes or something goes wrong. Now that you saved, you can go to the export. What you're going to want to do as a final check is go up through your model and just briefly look at the layers and make sure that your supports are forming properly and there's nothing colliding with your model, or there aren't pockets of resin inside the model that aren't going to get washed properly and cause the model to fail some time down the road. This looks pretty good. The supports look sound. Another thing that you'll see sometimes in Lychee is if you've added a bunch of supports and they're overlapping, then they will hollow out in the middle. It's sort of a bug. Delete the hollowed out support, re-add it, and it should not be hollow again. I have noticed that there is a gap between the rear propeller's supports and the front propeller supports. So you want to put in some intermediary supports in here and more bracings. What that's going to do is if you lose a support in the middle, it's going to pick it back up with the cross bracings. Why didn't that one have any braces? An hour later, here we are. You made it. Control S. All right, final step. Back out to export. We've saved the model. And we're going to hit the export slices to file. Before you do this, you want to double check that you're going to the right printer It's got the right type of resin. I'm not using any anti-aliasing in this. Hit the export slices to file, save it, and it'll start to generate the images your printer is going to use line by line. 3,873 of them. And this is a brand new Lenovo Legion Core i9 machine. And even this machine is going to take a while. A long while. So here we are, another 30 minutes into this rendering, and we have about another 30 minutes to go before it is fully rendered and we'll have a file to put into our M5S. All right, here we are in the lab, and here's our beautiful M5S, fully cleaned and loaded with resin, ready to start. I'll put the USB drive in and hit go. And in 4 hours, some odd, we will have ourselves a ship with any luck. Well, congratulations, you've made it to the end of this incredibly long form tutorial, and as a reward, the first person who comments made it, I'm going to mail you 100% free an Anycubic Cobra Neo. Just comment made it, and the first one who does it gets the printer. Cheers. The version of Lychee Slicer that I use, Lychee Slicer,